Hey everybody, welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, it's theclinicaltrialsguru.com, doing this one from my handheld GoPro just because I'm on the move. But keep your questions coming. I'm getting back to you guys. Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I'll keep you absolutely 100% anonymous unless you choose otherwise, and you let me know explicitly otherwise. So that's what I'm doing right now. I can't show you that, but I got a question from someone who is going to remain anonymous, and they have a question, so let me just read it. It says, Dan, could you provide guidance as to what are the most important factors to consider when selecting a location to open a clinical research site? Do you look at population, density, public transportation, average household income, the demographics, MDs in the area, competition, etc.? So here's what I do when I look for a new location to open a clinic, and for everyone it's different, but first, you don't want to compete with yourself. Although, I mean, you don't really, I don't think there's ever a good time to actually compete with yourself, meaning opening up too many clinics of your own within your own like small geographic region. So in Southern California, you can get away with it because it's huge. There's like 20 million people here. In places like New York City, probably so, big cities. A lot of research sites are in Florida, and so I personally would never open a research clinic in Florida. There's just, I don't know why, but for some reason there's just so many research clinics in Florida. So I generally would not open one there unless I was able to find like a really niche therapeutic indication, or if I was stubborn enough and refused to live anywhere else except Florida, which is not the case, but let's say Florida was my hometown and I did not want to leave at all, then I would still try to open a clinic there. So there's a lot of clinics there. So to answer your question, I don't look at population density. I don't look at public transportation. We can use Uber to transport study participants. I just did that this morning. I don't look at average household income. I don't look at the demographics. I do look at the MDs in the area, and I do look at competition. So the reason I don't look at demographics is because it doesn't really matter. I mean, unless you're going to be doing a certain type of studies that only a certain demographic has, like the best example I can think of right now is sickle cell anemia. It's primarily in African Americans. So I wouldn't focus on doing those kind of studies in a place where there's very few African Americans. So just common sense, a lot of common sense. The population doesn't really matter, like the density doesn't really matter. You could be in a rural place. There's actually a lot of sites in more of the rural places. For example, in between San Diego and Arizona, there's a town called El Centro. It's probably, I mean, it's considered rural. It's like primarily an agricultural city, a lot of field workers, but it's so underserved. Okay, and there's actually a pretty good population there, but it's not like a huge city by any stretch of the imagination. It's a quiet, sleepy town, but that's a great location for clinical research. I know some sites there doing really good. And actually, it's funny you mention whether I scout competition in the areas when I consider opening up a clinic, because I do, and I actually looked in that area of El Centro probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I saw that it was a small town, so I assumed there was no sites there. But when I did a little further exploring, a little more research, I found out that there were actually some pretty well established sites there doing a good job and actually having pretty profitable businesses. So I decided not to compete. I don't think that market is big enough for another clinic, especially since those clinics were doing a lot of the same type of trials that I was planning on doing. So I do look at competing clinics. I do look at MDs in the area too. You want to be able to find an MD First of all, you're going to need a PI. So the more MDs you have in your area, obviously the better. You have a bigger pool to select from. Also, the more MDs you have in your area, it can also help with recruitment. So, especially in bigger towns, obviously you're gonna have more MDs. But in smaller towns, like I said, El Centro, the reason I did not go there was because they didn't have as many MDs there. So a lot of the MDs that were already there already knew about the research clinics there. Those research clinics already reached out to them, had relationships with them, established some kind of rapport, maybe even some kind of business relationship. So I did not want to compete there. So I do look at MDs in the area and also make sure, like, you're going to have to do some research there and make sure that the MDs that you do talk to, here's an idea. Go in the area that you want to go to, that you're thinking of opening a research clinic. And after you do everything I just discussed, pick up the phone. You don't even need to physically go there if you're not there. Pick up the phone, go to WebMD, or not WebMD, Healthgrades, okay? Look up phone numbers of doctors in the area. Just start calling them. Get the front desk, or just Google physicians in an area. It doesn't matter how you call, how or where you get these doctors' info from. Just call enough, like 20, 25, maybe 30, and find out if they're interested in clinical research. You'll find out pretty quickly whether they are, whether there are enough doctors in that area, whether they're already doing clinical research. So you'll get a good feel of the market that way. And I want to get to your second question. So what I do look for is MDs in the area and competition, just to clear it up right there. Your second question, it says, from your experience, are there benefits to selling a company using multiples over 15 years to a relative rather than just selling it to an investor? Is there any difference in taxable liability from the seller's point of view? I understand you're not a CPA, but maybe you know something from your experience. So yeah, I'm not a CPA. I never considered selling to a relative. The only benefits I can see is that a relative, I mean, you may feel pressure to give them a better deal. And especially if you're going to stretch it out over a period of 15 years, a lot can go wrong during that time. I mean, they may not be able to actually run the business. Okay, and where does that put you? That puts you in a situation where you can't get your money because they're paying you the acquisition price over a period of 15 years. So what are you going to do if after year one the company's losing money and they can't pay you? Are you going to go back and work for the site to turn the business around? And then how are you going to calculate that into what they should be paying you? So it's a lot more complicated, and things can get messy when it comes to business and family. What I would do, I mean, I don't have children yet, but I would consider handing the reins to my kids. But as far as you actually making money off of it, I think you're better off going to an investor. You get it all at once, or usually over the period of a year or two. But 15 years is just way too long, right? So usually when you sell to an investor, they'll pay you over a period of a year. Usually the escrow will close in a year after they keep you on a retainer to make sure that the business is running smoothly with them and that the transition runs smoothly. So go with the investor, although well, I don't really see any benefits of selling it over a 15-year period to family because just way too much can go wrong. I do see a benefit of like giving it to a family or like passing it down to your kids, but like distant relatives, I mean, you're better off going with an investor, right? This is Dan from theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Hopefully this helped answer your questions, and keep them coming. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah.